Have you ever heard of Maurice de Hirsch? He was a 19th century German Jewish financier and philanthropist, a man so incredibly wealthy and generous that his name became synonymous with hope for millions. He poured his fortune, equivalent to billions today, into helping Jewish communities escape persecution in Russia and Eastern Europe, establishing schools, farms, and new lives for them in the Americas and Palestine. His full title was Baron Maurice de Hirsch, but to the people he helped, he was simply the Baron, a near-mythical figure, a savior. But where there's great wealth and a famous name, there are always shadows lurking. And in those shadows, opportunists saw not a chance for a new life, but a chance to get rich quick by exploiting the hopes of the desperate. This is the story of the men who dare to impersonate the Baron de Hirsch, turning a legacy of charity into a tool for deceit. Our story isn't about just one scammer, but a whole wave of them that swept across the United States in the late 1800s. The real Baron de Hirsch had established the Hirsch Fund in New York with millions of dollars to aid Jewish immigrants. The news spread like wildfire. For people arriving in a new country with nothing but the clothes on their backs, the Hirsch Fund was a lifeline. It offered loans, job training, and support. But this legitimate, life-saving charity also created the perfect cover for con artists. These men were clever. They didn't just ask for money. They crafted elaborate personas, dressing in fine clothes, renting fancy hotel suites, and speaking with an air of sophisticated authority. They understood that to be believable, they had to look the part of a European nobleman. Let us meet one of the most audacious of these impostors, a man who called himself Count Wilhelm von Kesselstadt. In the summer of 1891, he arrived in Chicago, a city teeming with recent immigrants. He claimed to be a personal representative of Baron de Hirsch, sent on a secret mission to identify worthy recipients for the Baron's immense generosity. He was charming, well-dressed, and had a story for every occasion. He would visit synagogues and community centers, speaking eloquently about the Baron's vision. He'd say things like, "The Baron has sent me to find the most industrious, the most deserving among you. He wishes to invest in your future, to help you build businesses and secure your place in this great nation." People were captivated. Here was a direct link to their benefactor, a man who could make their dreams come true. His method was simple but effective. After identifying a potential target, usually a small business owner or a family that had managed to save a little money, he would offer them an incredible deal. For a small processing fee or an investment deposit, typically a few $100s, he would promise them a massive loan from the Hirsch Fund, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. To people struggling to make ends meet, this was an irresistible offer. A few $100s seemed like a tiny price to pay for a fortune that would secure their family's future. The Count would collect the fees, issue fake promissory notes on elegant-looking stationery, and then promise to return with the full loan amount in a few weeks. Of course, he never did. By the time his victims realized they had been scammed, the Count was long gone, already setting up his next con in another city. Another notorious figure was a man who went by the name of Baron von Rothschild. Yes, he even co-opted another famous banking family's name for good measure, but also claimed to be working for de Hirsch. His specialty was the advance fee scam. He would tell desperate immigrants that to qualify for a large grant for a farm or a new home, they first needed to prove they had some capital of their own. He'd ask them to deposit their life savings with him, promising to match it tenfold with money from the Hirsch Fund. He would place their money in a safe or a bank box, give them a key, and assure them their funds were secure. But the key was a fake, and the box was empty. Once he had their trust and their money, he vanished, leaving behind a trail of financial and emotional devastation. These weren't just financial crimes. They were crimes against hope. These families had often endured incredible hardship to get to America, and this was a final, crushing blow. The press at the time was fascinated by these Baron de Hirsch swindlers. Newspapers across the country ran stories detailing their audacious scams. One article from St. Louis paper described an impostor who managed to convince an entire community to pool their resources to buy a large tract of land, promising that Baron de Hirsch would then fund the construction of a whole town. He collected thousands of dollars before disappearing. The sheer scale and repetition of these scams show how widespread the problem was. The real administrators of the Hirsch Fund were constantly forced to issue public warnings, publishing notices in English, Yiddish, and German newspapers, pleading with people not to give money to anyone claiming to be a representative of the Baron. They clarified that the real fund never charged application fees and had a formal, documented process. But the warnings often went unheeded. Why were these scams so successful? You have to understand the mindset of the victims. These were people in a vulnerable position. Many didn't speak English well and were unfamiliar with American customs and laws. They were primed to believe in a savior figure because they so desperately needed one. The name Baron de Hirsch was more than just a name. It was a symbol of salvation. When a well-spoken man in a fine suit showed up speaking their language and promising them the world on behalf of their hero, their skepticism was overwhelmed by their hope. The con artists exploited this deep-seated trust and desperation. They weren't just stealing money. They were preying on faith. So what happened to these imposters? The wheels of justice turned slowly in the 19th century, especially when a con artist was constantly on the move. But some were eventually caught. Police departments in major cities began to share information. One of the barons, a man named Maurice Schaefer, was finally apprehended in Philadelphia after a multi-state chase. His trial was a media sensation. His victims testified against him, tearfully recounting how he had stolen their life savings. Schaefer was sentenced to several years in prison. The capture of a few of these scammers brought some measure of justice, but it couldn't undo the damage. For everyone who was caught, several others likely got away. Their crimes lost to history. The legacy of these imposters is a dark footnote in the incredible story of Baron de Hirsch's philanthropy. It serves as a powerful reminder that even the most noble of intentions can be twisted and exploited. The real Hirsch Fund, however, continued its vital work. It helped settle thousands of families, funded agricultural colonies in places like New Jersey and Connecticut, and provided vocational training that enabled generations of immigrants to build successful lives in America. The good that Baron de Hirsch did far outweighed the evil of the men who misused his name. The real fund was a triumph of organized, systematic charity over chaos and desperation. This piece of history teaches us a timeless lesson about skepticism and hope. It's a story about the danger of blind faith and the importance of due diligence, even when an offer seems too good to be true. The de Hirsch imposters thrived because they sold a dream, and a dream is a powerful thing to sell to someone who has nothing. It highlights the eternal struggle between those who want to help and those who want to exploit. The story of Baron de Hirsch is one of monumental generosity, but the story of his imposters is a cautionary tale, reminding us that we must always protect our hope from the predators who hide in the shadows. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the hidden corners of history. Let me know in the comments what you think about this incredible series of scams. See you in the next video.